My name is Jenna Coyle, and this is the story of how my brother tried to humiliate me, only to spark the greatest mic drop of his life. I was always the quiet one, the nice sibling, the one who never needed a spotlight. But the night he mocked me in front of 70 people, he didn't realize I'd been sitting on a secret that would flip the entire room in my favor. Before we dive in, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. I love seeing how far stories like this travel. I wasn't invited to the dinner. That part still stings. The invitation had been lost in the mail, according to Aunt Pamela, which was funny since the rest of my family seemed to receive theirs just fine. But when you've grown up learning how to pretend things don't hurt, you show up anyway, with a smile and a homemade cherry pie. Savannah, my cousin, always threw over-the-top events. This time, it was a banquet hall tucked behind a country club in suburban Dallas, all twinkle lights and white-gloved waiters. The kind of place where the air smells faintly of money and everyone's wearing it too loudly. I stepped through the double doors and the room felt like it exhaled. Without me, conversations didn't stop. They just shifted like I'd tripped some invisible wire. A few heads turned. Most didn't bother, but Todd did. Todd, my older brother by 3 years and exactly 3 billion watts of smug energy. He stood near the center of the long, linen-draped table, holding a champagne flute like it was part of his anatomy. His voice, smooth and loud, cut across the din. Well, the clunker made it. Thought you'd need a tow truck to get here, Jen." Laughter bubbled up. It wasn't everyone, just enough to sting. My breath caught in my throat, but I didn't flinch. That's the thing about growing up invisible in a loud family. You learn to control your face. I held the pie in both hands, steadying it as if it could anchor me. "Thanks for your concern," I said, sliding into a soft Texas drawl I barely used anymore. "It got me here just fine." Todd tilted his head like I was a bug he'd just noticed on his sleeve. "Still dragging that high school junker around?" I just smiled, not wide, just enough to say, "Not tonight. I didn't come here to be bait." But I wasn't going to let him see a single crack. The room had gone back to buzzing, but the frost never left. Savannah spotted me. She always looked like she just stepped off a reality show set and gave me a glossy smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You made it," she said, lips already turning to talk to someone else. I nodded. "Wouldn't miss it." Except I almost had. I stood in my kitchen for 20 minutes, pie in hand, keys on the counter, debating whether it was worth it. Whether they were worth it. But then I remembered something my students always say when they build their first working app. Even small things deserve to be seen. So I came. I came for the pie, for Grandma Eunice, for myself. And as I looked around the room, 70 relatives, each glossier than the next, I made a quiet vow. I wasn't going to disappear tonight. The dining room looked like a magazine spread. Long tables draped in cream linen, tall glass vases brimming with orchids, polished silverware glinting beneath the soft sparkle of chandeliers. Every chair was filled with someone louder, wealthier, or more surgically perfected than the last. And there I was, pie dish already stashed with the rest of the desserts, quietly slipping into a seat at the far end of the table. No one noticed. Cousins buzzed about interest rates on jumbo loans and second homes in Aspen. Savannah's fiancé, some tech-adjacent finance guy, held court describing his investment in a skincare startup, curated by dermatologists and TikTok influencers. Everyone leaned in. Even Aunt Rhonda, who still can't open a PDF, nodded like she understood. I reached for my water, realizing I hadn't spoken in 20 minutes. Across from me, Aunt Pamela, Dad's older sister, the unofficial queen of subtle digs, caught my eye and smiled. A slow, syrupy kind of smile that usually came before a compliment that bites. "Still working with kids, sweetheart?" she asked, spooning quinoa salad onto her plate. "That's noble." Noble. Like I'd joined a convent or opened a soup kitchen in my garage. I nodded, setting my glass down gently. "Yes, ma'am, just launched a summer AI boot camp for middle school girls. We had students build working prototypes using Python and Arduino." "Oh, that's nice," she said, already turning her head toward Todd, who was in the middle of describing a multi-property flip that involved European tile and hand-sourced Moroccan lighting. My boot camp floated into the void like a balloon with a slow leak. I stared at my plate. Chicken, asparagus, a too-sweet glaze. It tasted like silence. I should have been used to this by now, being the quiet achiever in a family that only celebrates the loud. But something about tonight made the edges sharper. Maybe it was the way Todd's jokes still echoed in the back of my mind. Maybe it was how I could recite every person's resume at this table, yet none of them could remember what I actually did. I glanced down the table at Savannah's diamond bracelet catching the light. Marissa, our cousin who married into an oil family, had just returned from a spiritual reset in Mykonos. She was describing it in painful detail to Grandma Eunice, who blinked slowly like she was trying to disappear. Across the table, Chloe, one of the younger cousins, fresh out of business school, was showing off her new Cartier watch. "Got it as a bonus from my VC firm," she chirped. "We closed a Series B last month." "That's incredible," someone said. "You're killing it." And then the same voice, maybe Aunt Rhonda's, looked my way and asked, "Still live in that little place over near Oak Cliff?" I nodded. "Yep, renovated it myself. Solar panels, rain capture system, edible garden in the back." There was a pause. "Oh," the voice replied, confused. "So, like a hobby?" I swallowed the bite of chicken in my mouth and said nothing. "Hobby, sure, let's go with that. The truth is I love my home. I bought it before the market exploded and spent 3 years transforming it into something sustainable and smart. Every inch of it means something. Every wire, tile, and blooming tomato was a choice. But to them, if it's not glossy or expensive, it's invisible. I watched Todd gesture with both hands as he described a wine fridge that could age Bordeaux with precision humidity. He didn't drink red wine 2 years ago. Now he had an aging system. Across from him, someone mentioned Savannah's cosmetic line had just hit a national retailer. She beamed, her glossed lips parting to recite sales figures like scripture. I excused myself to go check on the pie. No one noticed me leave. I stood at the dessert table pretending to deliberate, though I'd already seen the options. My pie sat untouched at the far corner, like someone had accidentally placed a homemade trinket among designer handbags. I watched a waiter nearly clear it off the table, mistaking it for something left behind. I stopped him with a polite, "That one's mine," and slid it a few inches forward, closer to the edge. Maybe someone would give it a chance. Marissa and Chloe were perched beside the tiramisu tower, deep in their phone screens, polished and perfect in their curated casuals. Chloe wore designer sneakers that probably cost more than my entire outfit. Marissa had that smug serenity people wear when they're never the odd one out. They were flipping through photos of cars. "Matte Black screams, tech bro," Chloe said, scrolling. "But Dusty Rose, that says taste, class, maybe a little rebellion." Marissa snorted. "Or like, I still call my dad when I need help filing taxes." I smiled politely, hovering close enough to be acknowledged but not close enough to intrude. Finally, I stepped in. "I just got a grant," I offered, keeping my tone casual. "We're launching a new tech hub for my students. One of them built a robot that plays chess, and it actually learns from each match." Their heads turned slowly. Chloe blinked. "Like AI stuff," I nodded. "Sort of machine learning, basic neural networks. She's 11. Marissa tilted her head like I'd just described a particularly cute rescue puppy. "That's adorable." "Is it like a science fair thing?" Chloe added, sipping her rosé. "With baking soda volcanoes and spaghetti bridges." I smiled thinly. "Not quite. Last month they coded bots that beat most of our guest mentors." Chloe's eyes sparkled with something. Was it skepticism or boredom? "Well, that's super sweet. Good for them." Sweet. There it was again, the word people use when they don't know how to care. "It's more than sweet," I said, unable to stop myself. "Some of these kids are designing projects that track pollution in local lakes or use sensors to help visually impaired classmates navigate the halls." Marissa's lips parted as if she might respond, then her phone buzzed. "Oh my God," she gasped. "Ashley just got engaged. Look at this rock." They huddled over the screen like it was sacred text. I drifted back a few steps, heart thudding. The air around me felt thinner somehow, like I'd been trying to breathe in someone else's space. This is what always happens. I offer something real, something I care about, and it bounces off like soundproof glass. Behind me, laughter erupted from the head of the table where Todd was reenacting some dramatic negotiation. Everyone hung on his words like he was some financial prophet. I turned back toward the dessert table and picked up a fork, not to eat, just to have something in my hand. My pie still sat untouched. That's when I heard Savannah's voice at the other end of the table. I mean, Jenna's always been, low key. Low key. I stared at the polished surface of my empty plate. As if that were a flaw. As if building something meaningful without plastering it on Instagram made me invisible. As if being quiet meant being less. I took a breath and looked toward the hallway, considering whether to leave. Maybe I could say I had an early morning. Or a headache. Maybe no one would notice I was gone. But then, across the room, I caught sight of Grandma Eunice. She was sitting alone at the end of the side table, slowly spooning sorbet into a glass dish, her gaze distant. Not watching Todd. Not smiling politely at Chloe or Marissa. Just present. And in that moment I stayed. Not for them, not for my pie, but because I'd had enough of excusing myself from rooms I earned a place in. I didn't plan to slip into the kitchen. Honestly, I just wanted a breath. Somewhere without champagne corks popping and voices rising to talk over one another. I needed out of the velvet buzz of surface-level praise, out of the perfume-clouded air that seemed allergic to authenticity. The swinging door creaked as I nudged it open. Inside, the hum of industrial refrigerators and the muted clatter of cutlery offered a strange sort of peace. No one noticed me at first. A pair of waiters were laughing softly by the sink, and someone in a chef's coat was plating chocolate mousse with tweezers. I stayed to the side, invisible again, but for once it felt like relief. That's when I heard it. Voices. Familiar ones. Muffled but close. Grandma Eunice's, low and slow. She's the only one doing anything that matters. I froze. She was behind a partition wall near the pantry, speaking to someone Uncle Joe, I thought, based on the shuffling footsteps and soft chuckle that followed. And she never brags about it, Eunice went on. Just quietly building things, giving those kids a future. Uncle Joe made a grunt of agreement. Meanwhile, Todd's out there comparing hood ornaments. Eunice laughed. It was dry and knowing. He could learn a thing or two from her, but pride's a quiet flame. Doesn't crackle loud enough for folks like him. I stood there, rooted, like hearing a language I hadn't known I spoke. It wasn't praise exactly, not the performative kind my family lobbed at each other like confetti. It was truth, earned, and spoken when no one was supposed to be listening. They saw me, just not when I was in the room. A warmth sparked in my chest. Not the kind that sets you on fire, but the kind that glows in your bones. I turned and slipped back out without them seeing me. And I didn't go back to my seat. Instead, I drifted toward the end of the table where the kids were gathered, tired of adult talk, half scrolling on phones, poking at the last of their dessert with plastic forks. There were 4 of them, ages 9 to 12, clustered at a side table like it was their own island. I sat beside them, careful not to interrupt. "Want to see something cool?" I asked. A few shrugged. One boy said, "Is it another wedding slideshow?" I laughed. "Nope, it's better." I pulled out my phone and opened the gallery. I'd saved videos from our last showcase day at the summer camp. I showed them one of Alina, 10 years old, demonstrating her robot that navigated a maze using ultrasonic sensors. Her little voice echoed through the speakers as she explained the math behind the pathfinding. The boy blinked. "Wait, she built that herself." I nodded. "What is it?" asked another. "It's a maze-solving robot," I said. "It learns how to get through faster each time." Another girl leaned closer. "You built this?" "No," I smiled. "My student did. I helped her learn the tools, but she did the thinking." They passed the phone around, captivated. I showed them another video, this time a group project that used facial recognition to create an emotion-based art filter. "They called it the mood mirror," I said. "It draws how you feel." One of the girls clapped. "That's like magic." "It's science," I said, "and a little magic." Their eyes sparkled in a way I hadn't seen all evening. Then I felt it. A shift in the air, not big, not dramatic, but real. One of the teens from the adult table, a girl with blue nails and a phone case covered in rhinestones, wandered over, peering at the screen. "What's that?" The youngest cousin, still holding my phone, said proudly. Miss Jenna teaches kids to build robots that are smarter than people. I almost corrected her, but I let it hang. The teen smiled faintly, then looked at me. That's actually kinda dope. Kinda dope. From her, that was a Pulitzer. A few heads at the adult table turned just briefly, noticing the gathering, noticing me. And for the first time tonight, it wasn't me inching toward them. It was them starting to turn toward me. After dessert, Savannah clinked her crystal glass with a manicured fingernail and stood at the head of the table, eyes bright with curated excitement. "Okay, everyone, grab your drinks and head out back," she called out. "Todd's got a little surprise waiting in the garden. Trust me, it's worth the heels." A ripple of anticipation swept through the room. Chairs scraped back. Laughter grew louder. Napkins were tossed onto plates, half-finished flutes refilled. And like fish following a bright lure, they moved toward the French doors that led into the backyard, 24 conversations suddenly converging into one collective curiosity. I stayed seated, not in defiance, not even in protest, just still. My hands cradled a glass of sparkling water, condensation slipping down the side. I watched them through the wide windows, heels sinking slightly into grass, smartphone cameras at the ready, Todd beaming near a long, silver-draped shape that sat beneath a canopy of fairy lights. He stood like a man about to reveal fire to the villagers, and they were eager to worship it. Behind the glass, the quiet wrapped around me like a thin shawl. The energy, the hunger for show, it didn't reach me. Not anymore. I turned my gaze to the last slice of cherry pie still on my plate. The crust had cracked slightly from the heat, but the filling was rich and ruby-colored. I hadn't had a bite all night. I picked up a fork and let the sweet tang settle on my tongue. Still warm, still mine. That's when I noticed Aunt Pamela's voice behind me. "Jenna's still inside," she whispered, as if I were an artifact on display. "Maybe she didn't want to walk across the lawn in those shoes." A pause. Then Chloe replied, half laughing, "Or maybe she's allergic to applause." They both chuckled and walked on. I didn't flinch. I didn't even look up because they weren't wrong. I was allergic to the kind of applause you have to earn by performing a version of yourself they already approve of. Outside, Todd stood beside the covered object, champagne in hand, already mid-speech. He was made for this, spotlighted by string lights and admiration. His voice carried through the open door. "This is something I've been working on for months. And by working, I mean choosing the leather color and test driving for too many." Laughter erupted. I imagined him basking in it. It used to bother me, how easily he could command a room with little more than a raised eyebrow and a shiny thing. It used to make me feel smaller, but not tonight. Tonight, I realized I'd built something far sturdier than applause. The kids were still inside, two of them sitting cross-legged on the carpet by the fireplace, rewatching the video of the robot maze. One of them looked up and whispered, "Miss Jenna, how do you start something like that?" I leaned down, whispering back, with one question, "What if I could?" She nodded, wide-eyed. Outside, Todd's voice rang again. "Ladies and gentlemen, straight from Italy, because obviously may I present to you the future of fabulous." Hands reached for phones. The silver cover shimmered as it was tugged away. Gasps, whistles, someone even clapped. I didn't move. I didn't need to see it to know what it was. Todd had been teasing this unveiling on social media for weeks, just enough hints to stir envy. I'd guessed it weeks ago. A Ferrari. A red one, probably custom, definitely loud. Something sleek and expensive enough to hold a mirror up to his ego and still look small in comparison. I stood slowly and walked toward the back doors, not to join, not to react, just to witness. The crowd had formed a semicircle around the car. Todd posed beside it, running a hand over the curve like a proud parent. "Midlife crisis," he quipped, flashing a grin. "I call it early legacy planning." Laughter again. I stepped just past the doorway, drink still in hand, and leaned against the frame, watching. No one noticed me at first. That was fine. I was used to it. But this time I wasn't numb. I wasn't bitter. I was aware of the theater, the need, the transaction of it all, flash for praise, show for status. And I realized something I hadn't fully understood until this very second. Todd needed this. The attention, the gasps, the validation. He needed it like oxygen. And I didn't. That was the difference. He was feeding a hole. I was building something solid. I caught sight of Grandma Eunice sitting just inside the door, watching too. She didn't clap, didn't gasp, just smiled faintly and shook her head once, the kind of shake that said, "That boy still thinks the world spins faster when he smiles at it." Our eyes met. She winked, and for the first time all night I smiled without effort, because the spotlight might not be on me yet, but I no longer needed it to see my own worth. Outside, under string lights strung like constellations across the backyard, Todd had become the sun. Everyone orbited him, laughing, admiring, nodding at his specs and price tags as if they were gospel. The Ferrari Roma gleamed like a stage prop beneath its canopy of curated drama. Red, of course, because Todd had never been a man for understatement. I stood just inside the French doors, glass in hand, watching the scene unfold like a play I'd already seen. Every beat predictable, every reaction rehearsed. "Straight from Marinello," he beamed as if he just wrestled it from Enzo Ferrari's ghost. "Custom-stitched interior, had to grease a few palms for priority delivery." More laughter. Marissa whispered to Chloe, "You can smell the testosterone." "Right," Chloe replied, pulling out her phone. "Bet it even has its own cologne." I stepped out onto the stone patio but didn't approach the crowd. I didn't need to. The air was heavy with vanity and exhaust fumes. People crowded close to the car, taking selfies they'd later caption with things like "my cousin's wild toy" or "manifesting energy." And then, like clockwork, Todd turned toward me. "Hey, Jenna," he called, stretching my name into a punchline. "You still driving that jalopy from high school? Or did it finally crumble into compost?" It was the kind of laugh line that didn't require originality, just confidence. The crowd chuckled on cue, not all of them, but enough. Someone muttered, "He's ruthless," like it was praise. I stayed perfectly still, my grip on the glass steady. Across the lawn, Todd grinned wider like he'd just dunked on a toddler. "You've really gotta let that thing go, sis, unless you're planning to donate it to a museum for automotive failures." A few cousins glanced at me, waiting for a flinch, a comeback, a sign that it had landed. But all I said was, "It still runs." Todd laughed, loudly, the kind of laugh that eats space and invites no reply. "Sure it does," he said, gesturing toward the back of the driveway. "Still sounds like a dying lawnmower trying to yodel up a hill." Another round of laughter, this time thinner, more hesitant. The lights from the party cast a warm glow across the lawn, but beyond them, at the far edge of the property where the gravel met old oak roots, was my car. Half hidden in shadow, faded blue paint, modest, unassuming. To most of them it looked like something you donate or abandon, but I knew better. I knew the hours I spent sanding each panel down, replacing belts, tracking down parts online from obscure auctions. I knew how many Friday nights I'd given up in that garage with a heat gun in one hand and a YouTube tutorial in the other. I knew what it was, and what it wasn't. Todd's voice boomed again. "Don't worry, everyone. I'm sure if we all pitch in, we can get Jenna a tow truck for Christmas." Laughter. Again, but not quite as loud, not as certain. I saw Savannah glance my way, her brows furrowing just a little. Aunt Rhonda looked uncomfortable. Even Grandma Eunice, still seated near the patio doors, pressed her lips together in that way she always did when someone crossed a line. I took another sip of my water. The lemon slice had sunk to the bottom. No reply, no expression. Because I didn't need to play defense. Todd's whole world was built on surfaces, on loud engines, louder jokes, and the belief that bigger always meant better. Mine was built quieter, but deeper. And some truths, they don't need to shout to be heard. The laughter faded eventually. Not because anyone told them to stop, but because the joke had nowhere left to go. It hovered awkwardly in the humid Texas night, growing thinner like a balloon losing air. I didn't speak right away. Instead, I let the silence stretch just long enough to make them wonder if maybe, just maybe, they'd misjudged the target of their amusement. Then I stepped forward. Not fast, not slow, just steady. My heels clicked softly against the flagstone as I walked past the buffet table, the leftover champagne flutes, and the people who still weren't sure if I was about to laugh along with them or burn the whole place down. I passed Todd without looking at him. His grin wavered, but not enough. Not yet. I walked to the far edge of the lawn where the trees cast long shadows over the gravel. And there it was, my car, Faded denim blue, soft curves, subtle chrome, not flashy, not loud. A little dusty from the drive, but still beautiful, still mine. I stood beside it, resting one hand gently on the hood the way someone might greet an old friend. And then, without raising my voice, I turned back toward the crowd. "Actually," I said, "that's not a clunker." A few heads turned fully now. Conversations quieted. "It's a 1960 Jaguar XK SS. Silence. The kind that snaps attention into a room like a struck match. "Only 16 were ever made," I added. "Steve McQueen owned one. This one's older than most of the people at that table." Somewhere near the patio, a fork clattered onto a plate. Chloe squinted. "Wait, what?" I walked a few steps closer to the edge of the light, letting the car reveal itself piece by piece. "I spent 3 years restoring it," I continued. "Mostly weekends and mostly by hand." Todd snorted. "Right, and I'm Elon Musk's pool boy." It earned a weak ripple of laughter, but now it sounded strained. Unsure, I didn't even look at him. "Original engine block," I went on. "I had to learn how to rebuild the transmission myself. The paint's not original, but it's a match. Every nut and bolt I touched." A low murmur rippled through the group now, curiosity mixing with disbelief. Several cousins shifted closer. Chloe pulled out her phone and began Googling something. And then a voice broke through the chatter. Dad's, Warren Coyle, former sales director, opinionated, rarely impressed. He stepped forward slowly, squinting toward the shadows where my car rested. His voice was low but sharp with something unfamiliar. "Jenna, is that?" He walked closer, past Todd, past the ring of spectators, until he stood just a few feet from the Jaguar. Bent slightly, running a hand near the curve of the front fender without touching it. His eyes darted between the grille and the polished wheel wells, the shape of the hood, the line of the windshield. Then his breath caught. "Oh my God!" His voice cracked a little. "This is real. This car's worth over $1 million." The backyard fell silent. For the first time all night, you could hear the cicadas buzzing in the trees. Todd opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Behind him, Aunt Pamela dropped her champagne flute. The stem snapped clean in half. She didn't notice. Someone whispered, "$1 million." I said nothing. There was no need to, because for once the facts did the speaking. The crowd, so quick to laugh, so sure of the story they thought they knew, stood stunned. Every head turned toward the car, then to me, then back again, and I could feel it, not just their surprise, their recalibration. Their realization that maybe the quiet one, the one they always half dismissed, had never been behind. She'd just been walking a different road. The silence was a living thing. It pressed in from the trees. It crept between the floral arrangements. It settled on shoulders and made fingers hesitate mid-scroll. The kind of silence that could only exist when the story everyone thought they knew collapsed. Todd laughed. It wasn't genuine, it was performative, a reflex, a dying attempt at control. He pointed at the Jaguar and scoffed. "Right. And next you're gonna tell us you've got a bat cave under that little place you live in." A few people gave tight chuckles. They were polite laughs, defensive ones. I turned to face him fully now. My voice was calm, not sharp, not showy, just certain. "No bat cave," I said, "but I do have solar power, gray water reuse, and a hydroponic wall for fresh herbs." Todd blinked. "I also invested early in green tech," I continued, letting the words land softly. "Built a nonprofit focused on STEM access. And yes, I flip vintage vehicles on the side." Chloe's mouth dropped slightly. "Wait, like you restore cars." "Not for show," I said. "For value, long-term." Marissa crossed her arms. "You're saying all that nonprofit old car projects, kids' camps paid for this Jaguar?" I nodded. "They didn't just pay for the car, they are the value." People were turning now, shifting toward me in little steps like they were reorienting their understanding. Even Savannah, who'd been playing hostess all night with practiced smiles and effortless sways, took a step closer. "You really built all that?" "I did," I said simply. "While you were launching skincare lines and coordinating engagement shoots, I was teaching girls how to code and investing in companies that made clean water systems portable." A stunned silence followed. Even the teens stopped scrolling. Todd wasn't done. His pride wouldn't allow it. "Oh, come on, Jenna," he said, his voice laced with sarcasm. "You expect us to believe you just quietly got rich." I smiled. "Success isn't always noisy," I said. Sometimes it shows up in quiet choices, in compound returns, in not needing to tell everyone what you're doing every 5 minutes. It wasn't a jab, but it landed like one. A ripple went through the group, a shift not loud, but unmistakable. Uncle Joe, who'd laughed the loudest earlier, now leaned forward, hands in his pockets. "You flipped that car yourself," I nodded. "How'd you even learn?" "YouTube," I said, "and mistakes, lots of them." He let out a low whistle. "Damn." Aunt Pamela stepped forward, voice brittle. "But why not tell anyone? Why not say something before now?" I held her gaze. "Because I didn't come here to perform, I came here with a pie." That got a laugh, a real one. Even Savannah cracked a smile, but I didn't laugh because this wasn't funny. This was overdue. "You all thought I stayed small because I never flashed anything big," I said, the weight of my words sinking in. "But I've been building things for a long time. I just never needed to brand them." The energy shifted again. The Ferrari stood behind Todd, suddenly garish, excessive, shiny but hollow, and my car, it stood still, unbothered, unimpressed, exactly like me. Todd stood stone still. He'd lost his grin. That casual, cocky slouch he wore like a designer jacket had stiffened. His jaw was clenched just enough to notice. The crowd wasn't laughing anymore. Some were watching him, most were watching me. For once I had the floor, and I wasn't letting it go. He tried again, voice brittle, defensive. "Cars don't make you important, Jenna." It came out sharper than he intended. The edge of desperation was showing, like he could hear the balance shifting but hadn't figured out how to pull it back. I took a step forward, not to intimidate, just to be heard. I locked eyes with him, my brother, my lifelong rival, the boy who once erased my science fair data because he thought I was getting too smug. "Then maybe," I said, quiet and even, "you should stop defining people by theirs." He flinched, not much, but I saw it. "You thought I was nothing," I continued, "because I don't advertise my worth, because I don't care about appearances. But I've been building something meaningful, quietly, deliberately, on my terms." His mouth opened like he might interrupt. I didn't let him. "You've always needed to be seen," I said. "Always needed an audience to feel real. That's not ambition, that's emptiness." The words didn't come from anger. They came from clarity, from years of swallowing silence, from Thanksgiving dinners where I'd be cornered with, still working with kids, while Todd got standing ovations for flipping another overpriced condo. "This wasn't about a car," I said. "It never was. You mocked me because you needed someone smaller nearby to feel big." His hands curled into loose fists, but he didn't speak. Because what could he say? I stepped back, giving the space between us air again. The crowd was hushed, eyes wide, heads slowly nodding. No one was jumping to Todd's defense, not even Savannah. And then Uncle Joe clapped, one solid, deliberate clap, then another. It spread like a wave, soft at first, but real. Marissa stepped forward, still holding her phone, but now pointing it at me. "Wait, Jenna, do you do talks or anything, like school visits?" I blinked. "Sometimes. My niece, she's obsessed with coding. I didn't even know where to start." "I'll send you my nonprofit's site," I said. "She's welcome." Chloe nudged closer too, suddenly bashful. "Could I maybe donate or volunteer?" "Absolutely." The attention shifted, not the kind that explodes, the kind that roots. Aunt Pamela was next. Her voice unusually gentle. "You really did all this without ever bragging?" I nodded. "It's easier to grow when no one's watching." And just like that, the spotlight wasn't on Todd anymore. It had turned, not to flash or flame, but to substance. The crowd closed in, not around the Ferrari, but around me, the one who hadn't come to impress anyone, and yet somehow had impressed them all. The crowd had gathered around me, not out of politeness, but intent. Questions flew faster than I could answer. "What's the name of your nonprofit? Could my son apply for your tech hub? Would you ever speak at our middle school?" It was surreal. Not because I didn't think I deserved it, but because for the first time in my life they realized I did. Uncle Joe clapped me on the back so hard I nearly spilled my drink. "Jenna, you've got real grit," he said, grinning. "That's legacy stuff right there." Even Chloe, who'd once laughed at the idea of a school science fair, leaned in with genuine awe in her voice. "You're kind of a genius, huh?" I laughed. "Only on Tuesdays." The kids who had crowded around earlier now hovered at my elbows, showing their parents the robot maze video with reverent pride. One of them tugged at my sleeve, whispering, Do you think I could build one too? You already can, I told her. Across the patio, Todd stood alone. His hand still rested on the Ferrari's fender, but no one was paying it, or him, any attention anymore. His smile had vanished. His posture sagged just slightly, like air slowly leaking from a balloon. He was trying to understand what had just happened, trying to calculate how he'd lost control of a moment he'd built entirely for himself. And I didn't feel sorry, not even a little, because this wasn't revenge, it was justice. Justice for every holiday where he was the story and I was the footnote. Justice for every dig he made that no one stopped. Justice for every time I was praised for being sweet while he was celebrated for being successful. Now I was the one they turned to. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder, familiar and warm. Dad. Warren Coyle, who'd spent years congratulating Todd at full volume and offering me faint smiles over dinner. He stood beside me now, his eyes damp but proud. You've outdone us all, he said, just like that, softly, as if he didn't even realize how long I'd waited to hear it. It hit me like a breeze in a dry room. I'm proud of you, he added, and this time he looked straight at me. No distractions, no caveats, something in my chest cracked open. Because that was the thing, wasn't it? I hadn't come here to win. I hadn't come for applause, but somewhere deep inside I had come for that. For this. For the father I'd always wanted to look up and see pride on his face, not confusion. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat and nodded once. Thanks, Dad. His hand stayed on my shoulder a second longer before he moved back to the others, retelling the Jaguar's origin story like he was the one who'd helped pull it from the ashes. Let him. He wasn't stealing it from me. He was just proud to be near it. Todd was still at the edge of the group, trying to recover. I met his eyes, just for a moment, and he looked away first. The garden lights glowed softer now. Whatever energy had electrified the party earlier had diffused into something quieter, curious murmurs, small clusters forming around shared interest, not spectacle. I eased out of the spotlight and made my way toward the patio swing tucked beneath the pergola, hidden just enough from view to feel like another world. Grandma Eunice was already there, her legs tucked under a knit shawl, sipping tea from a mug that didn't match the rest of the evening's glassware. She always brought her own mug to family gatherings. Said China made the tea taste arrogant. Room for one more? I asked. She patted the cushion beside her. I was wondering when you'd come up for air. I sank into the swing, letting the creak of the chains lull my breath into something slower. Steady. Real. We didn't speak for a minute. The party noise faded into background hum, laughter, the pop of another bottle, the hum of a far-off car driving past. She nudged me gently with her elbow. That car was your Trojan horse, she said. I smiled. How so? You rolled it in under the radar, she grinned, and by the time they realized what it really was, you'd already taken the city. I laughed, shaking my head. I didn't come to prove anything. No, she said, sipping again. You didn't, but that's what made it work. She turned her face to mine, weathered and soft, but her eyes as clear and sharp as ever. Jenna, she said, you've done something the rest of this family hasn't figured out yet. I looked at her, waiting. You made peace with being underestimated. I blinked. That's power, she said. When you don't need the applause to know what you're worth, that's real freedom. I swallowed hard, her words threading into places inside me I hadn't dusted off in years. Do you think they'll forget? I asked softly. Back to who they were before tonight? Some of them will, she said. People cling to what makes them feel comfortable. For a few, you shook something loose. For others, you rattled their mirror. She tilted her head slightly. But no one's gonna look at you the same. A breeze passed through the pergola, rustling the lights overhead. I leaned back into the swing, letting the quiet stretch between us. I thought I wanted to be respected, I said. But now, I think I just wanted to stop feeling invisible. Eunice reached out and took my hand. You are anything but invisible, she whispered. You're a comet, sweetheart. Just because they never looked up doesn't mean you weren't blazing across the sky the whole time. My throat tightened, and still I smiled. I almost didn't come tonight, I admitted. She squeezed my hand. But you did, I nodded. Because deep down, she said, you knew it was time. The music shifted back at the house, soft jazz floating through the night like it knew it was time to exhale. The kind of music you play when all the games are over and all that's left is the truth. I turned to her again. Thank you. For what? For always seeing me, I said. She smiled. It was never hard. We sat in silence for a while longer, just the two of us. Two women who'd seen generations of this family move through different versions of success and significance, but had always known that real worth doesn't need spotlights, it just needs space. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, I had mine. 1 year later, I didn't hide my car under the oak tree. I parked front and center. The Jaguar's soft blue paint shimmered in the early autumn sun, and this time no one mistook it for junk. No one cracked a joke. No one rolled their eyes. It didn't need an introduction anymore. Neither did I. Savannah's front yard had been turned into a Pinterest-perfect harvest wonderland. Tiny hay bales, bronze gourds, gold-rimmed lanterns hanging from the trees. A photo booth shaped like a barn door stood near the porch, complete with faux corn stalks. But today, the decorations weren't the main event. Today I was, or rather my students were. I stepped out of the car, adjusting the straps on my shoulder bag, and looked back at the 3 girls climbing out behind me. Maya, 15, all sharp cheekbones and quick thinking. Nita, 12, bursting with nerves and excitement. And little Aaliyah, barely 11, clutching the drone kit like it was a sacred artifact. "You ready?" I asked. Maya smirked. "We were born ready." Inside, the smell of cinnamon-glazed pecans wafted through the entryway. People were already gathered in the main hall, sipping mulled cider and taking selfies. Laughter floated through the air like bubbles, but the energy felt different than it had the year before. This time, I didn't feel like a curiosity. I felt like a keynote. Savannah greeted me near the fireplace. Her smile was genuine. She looked, dare I say, relieved to see me. "There she is," she said. "Jenna, thank you again for doing this. The kids are going to love it. You don't know how many people asked if you were coming this year." I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" She nodded, tucking a loose curl behind her ear. "After last time, you're the most talked about person in this family. And not because of a scandal, but because of substance." We set up the presentation near the long dining table, now repurposed into a tech demo station. The girls laid out their schematics, drone prototypes, and solar battery modules. We connected the laptop to the TV for a live flight feed. The guests slowly gathered, drawn in by curiosity more than courtesy. I let the girls take over. Aaliyah went first, explaining the drone's purpose, environmental sampling near Urban Creek beds. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied by the second sentence. She even made a joke about how she once crashed it into her neighbor's garden gnome. The laughter was warm, real. Then Maya stepped in, flawlessly demonstrating a live drone launch from the backyard. It zipped into the air, hovered, dipped, and returned to the launch pad like a loyal bird. Nita closed the presentation with stats about grant money we'd used to develop the program and plans to scale next year. When they finished, the room exploded with applause. Even Aunt Pamela stood. Uncle Joe wiped at the corner of his eye like it had been a wedding toast. "That's the kind of project that makes the world better," he muttered. People asked questions, took cards, asked to volunteer. One of Savannah's friends from a neighboring school offered to fund a new hub space. And through it all, I stood behind the girls, letting them shine, because that had always been the goal, to make space, to light the path and then step aside. After the crowd dispersed, I slipped outside, finding refuge near the front walkway where the Jaguar still waited like a loyal witness. The air smelled like leaves and cinnamon, the kind of autumn that wraps you in memory. Then came the sound of sneakers slapping pavement. "Miss Jenna!" I turned just as little Luke, Savannah's youngest, ran full speed toward me, his cheeks flushed and his glasses slightly crooked. He skidded to a stop beside me. "Can I be in your class too?" I smiled. "You want to learn coding?" He nodded furiously. "And drones and robots, and Maya said you help kids build stuff that changes things." I knelt beside him. "I do." "Okay," he said, breathless. "I want to do that. I want to make something real." I nodded, blinking back the swell in my chest. "Deal," I whispered. Behind us, the drone whirred again, this time with a GoPro strapped to its base, capturing shots of the house from above. Inside, the party buzzed. But out here, in this driveway, I felt the full weight of everything that had shifted. A year ago, I came to that dinner carrying a pie and a head full of dread. Tonight, I brought a fleet of futures. And the spotlight, it belonged to the next generation. That was the legacy I was building. And this time, no one missed it.